So today we will see uh, how to manage our carbon in new cost structure. We have always managed our mills based on the cost of iron ore, coking coal and energy. But as of January 1st, 2026, a new variable enters our profit and loss statement, carbon. And this is not just a regulatory update, it's a fundamental shift in our industry's financial mechanism. Today, we are going to look at the strategic playback for Indian steel under the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism or CBAM. We'll cover why our current production models are at risk, the exact math behind the new carbon tax, and the most importantly, how we re engineer our operations to stay competitive in the market. So, to understand where we are going, we first need to see exactly where we are on the global timeline. So, this becomes also important. The European Union Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism is already here. Many people think CBAM is a future problem. It's not, it's already here. If you look at the blue section on the left, we have been in the transitional phase. Since October 2023, we are in the transitional phase. This has been a period of reporting only, no checks written yet. But look at that middle orange section. January 1, 2026, that is our operational deadline. That is when mandatory certificate purchases begins for every ton of HRC or hot rolled coil or wire rod we send to Europe. By February 2027, the first full annual declaration are due. We are moving from reporting to paying. But why is this hitting India harder than our global competitors? Now, India's structural disadvantages in a carbon tax market. Let us look into these. This table tells a sobering story. Our carbon intensity is roughly 2.5 tons of CO2 per ton of steel. Compare that to global standard of 1.9. That's a 31% higher emission penalty right out of the gate. Why? Because 80% of our production relies on BF route, the blast furnace, which is highly carbon intensive. We also import nearly 98% of our coking coal, locking us into a high emission, high cost cycle. With 60% of our export destined for the Europe, we are the most exposed industry in the world to this tax. So let's get granular. Let's look at exactly how a single ton of steel is taxed under these new rules. So, coming to our anatomy of a taxable tonnage. So, the BF calculation, if you look into, uh, so look at this laser on the screen. This is a case study for a typical ton of hot rolled coil. We track everything direct scope 1 emission from coking coal, that's 1.96 ton of CO2 right there. Then we add the iron ore and the limestone and even the grid electricity is our scope 2 emissions. So when you add it all up, a single ton of steel carries 3.07 ton of embedded emission. Every raw material choice and every megawatt from the grid now carries a direct calculatable calculable financial penalty. So what does that 3.07 figure actually cost us in Europe and euro and rupees? So this we will going to explore in our next slide. The carbon penalty, that is 0.7080, added to every ton, and this is the bottom line. The European Union carbon price is projected to be between 70 and 80 euro per ton of CO2 in 2026. Based on our 3.07 emission factor, that's an added cost of 19,350 to over 22,000 for every single ton of commodity steel. So this is an unabsorbable cost. You cannot simply pass a 20,000 price hike to a customer without losing the market. So let's look at what this does to a typical mill's profit margin. So let us go through a case study, a 35% where 35% wipeout of profit margins. So look at the bar chart on the left. We start with a base revenue for uh, um, 100,000 tons of export. That's orange drop is the CBAM tax deduction, roughly 157 crores Indian rupees for this scenario. For a mill operating on a standard margin of 6,000 to 7,000 Indian rupees per ton, this represents a 35% margin compression overnight. So this is not just a trim of the profit, it's a wipeout of the executive reality we have operated under for decades. However, the impact is not the same for every facility. Now, coming to the efficiency premium. So, diagnosing your facility's risk. Where does your plant sit on this spectrum? So, a modern plant using the latest tech has a penalty of about 14,700 per ton. But look at the old plant on the right, 20 plus years old with a legacy infrastructure. Their penalty jumped to 21,000 per ton. So legacy assets are no longer just old, they are massive financial liabilities. Delaying modernization now guarantees uncompetitive pricing in the global market. To see the full scale of the problem, we have to compare ourselves to European domestic steel. So the competitiveness gap 50% more expensive than European Union steel. So this is the landed cost quiz. On the left, European steel has a minimal carbon cost because they still receive free allowances under their system. On the right is Indian steel. Our base price is the same, but once you stack the CBAM tax on the top, our total landed cost in Europe is 525 euro. That makes us 41% to 50% more expensive than domestic European alternatives. So the mechanism has created an artificial price gap that we cannot overcome through labor or material saving alone. This sounds like a crisis, and it is, but there is another side to the scale. That is synthesis. Carbon intensity is the new ultimate market. So filter, think of carbon intensity as a think of carbon intensity as a filter. So on the left we have the risk, uh, inescapable cost increases, margin compression and loss of market share. But look at the right side, the ROI of adaptation. Companies that decarbonize first get access to premium pricing for green steel. They secure long-term contract with European OEMs who are desperate for low carbon supply chains. By 2030, competitive advantage will belong exclusively to low carbon players. Decarbonization is no longer a green initiative, it's a revenue protection strategy. So, how do we do it? Here is the first pillar of our strategy. So, engineering the carbon out, we have three primary dials we can turn to reduce our emissions. First, renewable energy. By replacing grid power with a dedicated solar or wind, we can drop our electricity emission factor by 0.58 down to 0.15. Second, carbon capture. Retrofitting our existing blast furnace can reliably cut direct emission by up to 30%. And the long term goal is hydrogen DRI. This drops emission to nearly a third of current levels, though it requires green hydrogen costs to fall to be viable. But we do not have to wait for hydrogen to make a change. Coming to the strategy pillar 2, shifting routes and optimizing inputs. The fastest way to lower our tax bill is to shift our production route. We need to move from heavy BAF BOF flow towards scrap based electric arc furnaces. This transition can lower emission by 50% or even less compared to the blast furnace. We also need to focus on micro efficiency, upgrading furnace insulation and modernizing legacy technology can shave 3 to 5% of fuel use. It's incremental, but in a CBAM world, every percentage, every teeny decrease is a direct tax relief. So, finally, we have to look at the financial and market side of the equation. Coming to the strategy pillar 3, unlocking market and capital. Advantages, unlocking market and capital advantages. So, decarbonization is not just an engineering challenge, it's a data challenge. It's a data challenge. We must establish verified transparency in this data handling. Rigorous data tracking and ISO 14064 certification are the price of admission to the European Union market. These data also unlock ESG focused financing. We can tap into green bonds and sustainability linked loan to fund this massive transition at a lower cost of capital. So remember, fast movers can command a 5 to 10% price premium for low carbon steel, which helps offset the remaining CBAM cost. This brings us to our final roadmap. So the action blueprint synchronizing with the 2030 mandate. So this is your immediate action plan. Between now and March 2026, you must get authorized as an official EU CBAM declarant and compile your 2025 emission data. Throughout 2026, you will begin mandatory quarterly reporting and start securing certificates to cover at least 50% of your emission. The hard deadline is September 30, 2027, the day you surrender your first annual certificate. The message is clear and crystal clear. Prepare today, compete tomorrow, decarbonize now.